Hi everybody, Steve Farmer here, and it's round 5 of the Ye Old Pueblo 2012. I'm just going to bring one video from round 5. It's going to be game fragments, just highlights of the last round. This is not a tournament report, but I do want to point out that in the open section, Mohandesi, who's rated 2375, he took first place. Milikset Kahachian took second. Well, he tied for second, along with Ken Larson, Nick Thompson, Michael Vilenchuk, and Matt Noble. So a massive tie for second place. But Mohandesi is a new name here, and he is going to be playing for the Arizona Scorpions, which I think is pretty cool. I got the chance to talk to him briefly. He's a really nice guy. Now, that was the open section. Now, the reserve section was won by Michael Belikowski. Now, Mikhail Belikowski. Mikhail and I have been friends since he came to the United States many, many years ago. He is the father of Angelina Belikovskaya, who was 3 times women's U.S. champion. Really great family. Love him a lot. He took first place with 4.5, and then there was also a tie for second and third between Bennett Katz and Isaac Ewing. And then tying for 4th through, oh my God, 8th place was Scott Knight, Jordan Cowell, Jose Angel Castillo, Brian Nguyen, and Kyle Twitchell. Now, in the booster section, Patrick Schaefer took it again with a perfect score, 5 wins, no losses, no draws. But all of those were rather shaky, every single game. Now, we had a clear second in this, was Aaron Murthy, who scored 4 points. And then we have a big tie for 3rd through 6th with Sripathi Krishnan, Sam Watson, Liam Matthews, and Jason Fan. All right, so that's the tournament report. Let's get on with the actual fragments from round 5. Here we have John Williams playing white, and he's playing, I think this is Lakiki Aipa. Yeah, he's rated 1997. White is 2168. And white just recaptured after bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. And now black could have a totally level game with queen takes c3, b takes c3, and b5. And I think play is just dead level. Aipa really messed up the black side of it, Nadorf, and that's why I don't want to bring you the opening to make me cry. Anyhow, in this position he plays queen takes a2. Now, you're playing white. What do you play here? Pause the video. There are 2 good answers to this, but pause the video and see what you come up with. Okay. One way to go about it is just straightforward rook takes g6, because if pawn takes the rook, then bishop c4 check is going to fork the queen and the king. But John played bishop c4 first, which is a really nice touch because he sacrifices a rook this way. Queen takes h1, now rook takes g6. Black tries to fight back. Mate is threatened on g7. The rook can't be captured because of the pin. King to e3, queen to c1, king to f2, and rook to d4. I mean, it's all over. It's just not even desperation at this point. It's just like, go back to h1 and let me, well, I can't even mate you, damn it. King to g3, and realizing that he cannot avoid mate much further. You know, white's next move is going to be mate. Black resigned. Okay, we join this game. It's Cepheus Martinez at 1337 playing white at the top, and Richard Quesada playing black at the bottom here. I just thought this showed some interesting tactical ideas that the players missed, and I wanted to point them out. So if you're watching the videos, guys, yeah, there was some things lying under the surface here. Cepheus plays knight c1. Bishop to e1 was probably better, but I think white is still losing. Now, the material's equal, but I think white is just lost here. Black has a commanding presence in the center, well-developed and posted pieces, rooks on open files, knight sitting right in white's face. It's over for white. He's lost. Now, you still have to close out the game. Richard played knight takes c1, which is still winning, but there is a better way. It's better to take on d2. If white takes on e3, we can just grab the rook and go up the exchange. So this is winning for black. So queen takes d2. It's probably the best shot. And now is the tricky part. How does black follow this up? Well, you follow it up with knight to e1 check. It's a tricky move. Now there's several choices for white here. If rook takes e1, queen takes d2, knight takes, and now rook takes e1, again we are the exchange up. Or queen takes e1, rook takes e1, rook takes e1, rook c3. Now we're basically a queen for a rook and a knight, but it gets worse because white's pieces are not coordinated and black's are. Alright, you got to defend that knight on f3, so rook to f1. Now queen to e4, hitting the rook on b1, keeping the pressure on the knight on f3. And if knight to b3, so the rook is protecting the rook and the rook is protecting the knight, then we get rook takes f3, undermining the whole chain of events there. So the knight's on the third rank and the rook's on the first. This just throws a monkey wrench into that whole plan. And then after this, black is up the exchange of queen for a rook. And back here after knight to e1 check, it just simply king h1, then queen to f5, hitting that rook. That technique pops up again. And then knight to d3, and knight takes, and black is winning. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. Let's see how the game continued. Knight takes c1, rook takes c1. Now knight takes d2 still works, but rook takes c1. Now bishop takes c1 should be played. Black has a slight pull in the position after that. We played queen takes c1, and now knight takes d2 is played, and this is not the move to play. The move that Richard should have played here is g5. The threat is obvious, threatening g4. Then we're going to have a nasty discovered check with that knight moving from e5 and the queen sitting on d5. So g4, stop that. Now queen to d3, threatening to infiltrate via the e2 square. Bishop to e3, getting ready to block. Knight c3, just piling on more pressure on that bishop on e3. Now bishop c5, rook to e2, king h1, queen to e4, h3 protects that pawn, bishop to e5. Okay, we're threatening rook to h2 and knight to e2, winning material. Bishop to g1 stops that. Queen to d5. Now we're threatening to bring the knight in to g3, giving mate. Queen to a1, knight to e4, bishop to d4. So it gives the king a square to move to. Knight g3 check, king g1, and now queen to e4. We don't have to take that bishop, we can let him take it, because if he takes it, we have mate in 2 with queen to e3 check, and then queen takes f2. So rook to f2 seems to be the best defense here. Rook takes, king takes. Now, queen to c2 check, king to g1, and the problem for white is knight to e2 check. And why is this a problem? Well, if he goes anywhere on the second rank, it's going to have the same result. If he goes to f1, then we go to here, and we're threatening mate in 2. He can stop that with queen to b2, guarding via x-ray. But now you trade queens, and the bishop on b2 is hanging. Ta-da! Simple, huh? It's more or less a forced line. This is really like the best line that white can defend with. It's really hard to see from this position how to, get all the way to that. Of course you're not going to. But just showing you the best line of play shows you that g5 was nothing to worry about for black, and it keeps the pressure on white. So you got to look for things like that. What do you do if he plays queen to c2 or queen to b1? Well, you have enough time to move your king, and you have enough time to throw in g4 before that. Alright, so let's continue on with the game. Knight takes d2 was played. Queen takes, knight takes. And I think things are pretty level here. because he can play rook f2. Take, take. Bishop d4 check. King f3. King g7. h4. White starts to falter here. Your pawns in the endgame, you don't want to really throw up the board until you're sure that you're going to be able to make use of the moves. You may want that pawn on h3 instead. But when you move it to h4, you're putting it on the color square complex of your opponent's bishop, which could make it a target in the long run. King f7. Now king to e4 would probably equalize, but knight to e4 was played. King e6, I think black is clearly better now. Now king to e2 should have been played. King d5, king d3. Black is better, but not winning. Not yet, at least. Played knight to c5. I mean, this looks logical to hit the pawns, but you got to calculate out what happens after captures. Checks, captures, and force moves. Always look at those. Pawn takes, king to d5, and the game is just over here. Alright, black plays king to e5 in this position. Let's go back. Can black play king takes c5? Can he get away with this? Pause the video. I mean, even write this position down in your notebooks because it's an interesting one to know. It's white to play. What is it? A win? A loss? A draw? Well, what's the result here? I mean, this is something that can actually be counted out. So this is a good exercise for vision. Black can actually win this game, but he has to play it accurately. Okay, I hope you've paused the video and maybe written this down for further study, but it's good to know. So king to e4, and what happens if white goes after the pawns on the king side? Well, king c4, then we get this going on, and now he takes. Now we do not take back. We play a4. Well, if you take, that actually leaves the door open for drawing possibilities. And we'll see why in a moment. So let's look at a4, king h6, a3, g5. Now, all these king and pawn moves can be intermixed, but they're going to result in the same thing. a2, g6, a1, queen, g7. Well, let's look at king h7. Queen h1. He's going to lose that h-pawn. So he tries this. Queen takes h4. King to g6. Queen g4. King to f7. Queen f5. King e7. Queen g6. Has to come back to the pawn. Queen f6. King tucks in front. And now, what do you do? Can you take the pawn on b4? No, I would not recommend that. Instead, play king to d5. Now, if he goes king to h7, we go queen f7, king h8, queen h5. He has to go in front of the pawn again. Now we bring the king in, and this is very typical winning pattern for queen versus pawn. Okay. Now we just looked at king to h7 by white. So what about b5? King e6, king h7, queen h4, king g6, queen g4, king h6, king f6. You can prolong it by promoting to a knight, but it's over. Alright, so that was looking at king to h7. What about h5 to try and preserve that pawn for future use? Well, we got queen to h8 check here, and this is the reason why pushing the a pawn rather than taking on b4 makes a big difference. King g5, king comes over, and we start crushing this way. So king g4, queen h6 stops white from advancing the pawns on the king side, and he can grab the b pawn and then come back up and corral the rest. So h6, queen e5, king goes back, queen f6, king h5, queen f5, king h4, and now we take on g6. Easy win for black. But yeah, on the h5 line, that's why the pawn has to promote on a1 and not b1. And finally, g7 right away, queen f6, king h7, and for a touch of irony, it's thanks to the b4 pawn for white that there are no stalemate tricks here. If king to h5, if that b pawn were gone, this would be stalemate, but since there's a pawn there, it's not. So it's easy win for black. So king h7 is the best shot. Queen takes h4, and we've seen this dog and pony show before. King f8. It's a very easy endgame to understand. Okay, let's go back to our game. So it was possible to take the pawn, but then you had to calculate really hard and long variations to determine whether you're going to be able to hold that. King e5 makes a lot more sense, so it's a very simple move. Now g5, pawn takes, now king has to give way. If he plays a4, we go a5. And now if he goes to d3, we come into f4. Or if he goes to f3, we come into d4 and pick off the pawns over there and don't allow the white king in. So the move of a4 doesn't really gain white anything. Black always has the tempo burner of a5. King f3, king d4, king g3, king e3. King takes c5 was easier to do, I think, but king e3, king g2, king f4, and this is a very simple way to play it. Zugzwang and win it this way. Okay. And at this point, white resigned. We're going to close out round 5 with a game from Mikhail Belikovsky playing white, rated 1746, playing Jose Castillo, who's rated 1658. And this is for first place. Whoever wins this game takes first for the reserve section. I'm going to go through the opening rather quickly because it's not an opening I play, and it soon will transpose into an opening. That's the way Mikhail is. Okay, well, we have somewhat of a transposition into a French. Now c takes d4 here is probably best. I think after this, I think the black is doing okay here. What is that knight doing on h2? But he plays f5 instead. Knight f3, c4, b3, b5, a4, bishop a6 was played, and that's a bit of a mistake. Just play queen a5. But he plays bishop a6, ab5, bishop b5, knight a3, and now queen a5 should be played again, but he played bishop takes a3, bishop takes. And now his rook's under attack. I think he should play rook to e8. He did not, but rook to e8, pawn takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, and now I think white gets a good game with d5. It may well be close to winning at this point for white. But rook f7 was played, and now knight to g5, and that rook is lost. Rook e7, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, bc4, bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4, d takes c4. And I remember talking to Mikhail before this game started. I said, you know, I've known him for a long time, and I says, just be safe. You win the game, you win the tournament. And maybe it was my advice, maybe since he had a great position and wanted to just sit on it and slow things down. But regardless, he probably should have tried to stay more active here. In the game, he played king to h1. But okay. Queen to a4, I think, is just a much more active choice for white. And black is just stumbling all over himself, and he's down the exchange. So I just figured that finishing development was a better idea. But okay, king h1 is not throwing anything away. Knight to b6, queen c2, h6, knight f3, knight to d5, and now knight to d2, hitting the pawn, knight to e3, protecting it, forking the rook and queen, queen to a4, now rook to c8. If he had taken the rook, then we get queen takes on c6, and if rook to b8, knight takes f1, leaves white a piece up, and knight takes d2, queen takes a8 is check, king h7, and d5. White's back to being the exchange up. He's got a lot of play. The pawn's rolling down the center. He's going to play rook takes a7. It's just a completely winning game for white. So that's why Jose decided to play rook to c8. I think that's the best move. Now rook to f3, Knight to d5. At least he's got an outpost for the knight. Knight takes c4, so it's the exchange and a pawn. And compensation. King h7, knight to d6. Nice post for the white knight. Rook to c7, queen to d1, g5. This is getting rather reckless, but I can understand black's frustration. What else is he going to do? fg5, hg5, c4, knight to f4. And now, if you were playing white, pause the video. This is a good one here. What would you play? White to move and win. Okay, well, in the game, Mikhail was not bothering to calculate things out. He was just playing it safe and simple and played queen to d2, which is winning enough. But rook takes f4. So a little bit of calculation would have led him to find this line, because there's a surprising move after queen to h5, king g8. He needed to see knight to e8. These are not easy moves to see back from this position. But here, knight to e8 is very powerful. We're hitting the rook, and we're threatening knight f6. Both are very dangerous. Queen f7. If he tried to move the rook, then we go knight to f6 check, king f8, queen h8, king f7, queen to g8 is checkmate. And if queen to f7, queen to g5 is check, king f8, now we can take the rook. Queen takes, and we're back up to an exchange and a pawn up. Queen h6, but the thing is via several checks, we're able to simplify the position greatly. King e7, queen g7. Just do more checks here, and tries to run away. We can do this. Now if the king runs over to the b file, the rook joins in the fun and games. So queen to d7, queen takes, king takes, rook a6, with a very easy win for white. But Mikhail decided to just keep going forward, keep the pressure on slightly, but all the way. And this works out for him because he's up the exchange in a pawn. Now rook takes d6, e d6, queen d6. Now he's up 2 exchanges. But now he decides to give one back to simplify. Not as strong as before, but good nonetheless. Queen takes, pawn takes. And now d5. Very nice, because if he plays pawn takes, d5, rook to a6, going to win the knight. So he moves the knight. Now we go d6, king f6, c5, connected past pawns. Very nice. Knight c6, rook a6, knight to d8, c6, and it's all over for black. He has to give up material, and that's not even going to help. Knight takes c6, rook takes c6, e5, d7, discovered check, king e7, and now I thought he would play rook to e6. He played rook to h6, but let's look at rook to e6. Well, he can't take, because we promote, so he can take this pawn, we can take this one, and this is just really easy. But in the game, he played rook to h6, king takes d7, king to g1, a5, rook a6, and black resigned. So Mikhail ended up with a score of 4.5 out of 5. Job well done. And thanks for representing the older guys out there, Mikhail. Appreciate it. I'm in your debt. All right, folks, I'm sorry for the down and dirty version of the last 2 rounds of the Ye Old Pueblo. But I wanted to wrap things up, finalize them, before I move on to the U.S. Chess League, which starts tomorrow. I'll have a short video on some matchups from the U.S. Chess League coming up shortly. Until next time, good luck.